Thank you all for being here and welcome. We have a really fantastic topic for you all today. My name is Deneen. I serve as a sales enablement manager here at Mongoose, and I'm going to play the role as your co-host today for our topic, which is from silos to strategy. We're going to be looking at how to align teams for scalable student engagement. We have a really fantastic panel for you today, and so we're just so happy that you're here. A few webinar just FAQs before we get started, like we do every single month. Please feel free to use the chat for any comments throughout the session, and you can use that Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom for any questions that you have. We'll try to answer those live as they fit into the conversations, or I may answer them through the chat as well. The session is being recorded and it will be shared with you after today's webinar. Of course, we would love to engage with you on social media using that hashtag Mongoose. So check us out online. We've got some really excited things coming down the pipeline next Tuesday, April 21st. So if you haven't, ask us about it. We would love to talk to you about it. I am really excited to introduce to you the panel for today. I'm going to let Mary, Courtney, and Dr. Christina Brandon introduce themselves. Mary, I'll let you get started.
Awesome. Thanks, Deneen. Hi, everyone. We're so excited to have you join us today. As Deneen shared, I'm Mary. I'm a client success manager here at Mongoose. I've been with the Mongoose team for 2 years now, and before that, I worked on campus in career services. So super excited to talk with all of you today and get this started. So Courtney, I'll pass it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Hey, everybody. Glad to see some familiar faces here in the crowd. I've been here at Mongoose for a year as of the other day. Prior to that, I worked in the tech space helping nonprofits. I love strategizing with my customers and seeing the way that techs, land with your audience and all the success that everybody has. So really looking forward to this webinar today. I've had the pleasure of working with Christina over the last few months, so I'll pass this over to you to introduce yourself as well.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here today. Like they said, I'm Christina Brandon. I've been with the Western Iowa Tech Community College for over 22 years, started as an adjunct instructor in the communications department, and then transitioned for 12 years or so to run the TRIO programs, Upward Bound and Talent Search on the campus. Transitioned then after that over to Associate Dean of Students and oversaw campus housing, student activities, and the recruitment team. For the last 4 years, I've been the Dean of Outreach, which includes the marketing department, recruitment team, and then also CIO as the information technology department. So excited to share some ideas and learn from you all as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Christina. We're excited to have you today. So today's agenda, we're going to talk through the problem that we're hearing from a number of our customers of siloed communication on campus, why alignment matters more than ever today as you're communicating with your students and other constituents, and then that shift from having the access to tools and technology to ultimately having the alignment on campus where everyone's on the same page. And then we'll share some ideas that we've heard from others, and Christina will share her experience of how creating that standard across campus to help make sure everyone is in alignment. Our goal by the end of today is that you'll know how to align your teams, clarify roles, and create a more coordinated approach to student communication and ultimately allow students to feel that holistic experience in communication.
So we would love to know from each of you on here today, who owns student communication at your institution? Take a minute to drop that into the chat. And while we wait for some responses to come in there, Christina, can you tell us a little bit more about your role and how your team engages with students today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a multitude of different teams today that use Cadence to engage with. So currently the recruitment team uses, and it's their favorite tool for all things recruitment. So we text students right after we receive their application for admission and follow up with them just to welcome them to the college. We often follow up with scholarships. We guide students through those many next steps that are needed. any question that they have, getting logged into their technology as a new student. We also use it for anyone that's attending an event with us, and we manage the RSVPs, and then we also follow up before and after events to send those reminders to bring them to campus. In terms of a marketing focus, my marketing team uses it for both the new and returning students. So on the new end, we send them engagements to keep them engaged and excited about coming to the college. So we share different ideas about, their classes and what's coming up for them as well. With those returning students, it's really fun to engage with them by sharing, tips on during the semester with their classes, make sure that they're on the path for completion. Are they using anything or need any other student services? We often share those out for tutoring ideas. And then, of course, we use it to make sure that they're paying their bills and that when they know registration is open for the next semester. IT, we actually use it to remind students. We have a one-on-one program, and so we remind students when that technology, the laptops are due back to us, and we also reach out that they can check out those laptops from us. And then housing, of course, we're communicating everything for move-in to key dates that they need to do during the months. We often do room checks with them, so we let them know beforehand that those are occurring, and we promote all the housing events at night in the dorms to them as well. And then student activities, really we lean into that engagement piece. We want to promote those events, encourage their participate, and we use incentives, with different prizes to keep them involved. So our goal is kind of all over in terms of that, but really it centers around that engagement piece.
Amazing. I love that you do prizes and incentives. I feel like we all love that. And so that was a lot of teams. Do you know roughly how many teams at your institution are communicating with students on a regular basis?
Yeah, so there's probably about 9 different teams. So in addition to those, our admission team uses a lot, our TRIO programs as well. We have non-credit corporate college. They use it to engage with their students as well. And then academics is also a user on a regular basis to keep that engagement and information flowing to those students. So we do have a lot of cross-departmental different teams using it but for very targeted purposes.
Awesome. Thank you for that information. It's helpful just to understand how Western Iowa is structured as we continue through today's conversation. So in the chat, a lot of responses and all over the board, which is so interesting to me. And we're going to kind of address this. It's some people that have a little bit of, Amanda's response. Everyone, no one. I think a lot of people feel that. And that's why we are here today. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And with that, Mary, I'll give this to you.
Yeah, awesome. And that was the comment that I was thinking as well. Courtney, was Amanda's of everyone, no one, who knows. So that's something that we are hearing a lot from our partners, and things that you're not alone. Sometimes it is admissions that kind of is taking the lead. Other times it's student success or marketing. So I think the chat really shows that it can be all over the board, and that's totally okay. Like I said, you are definitely not alone in that experience. One thing that we are finding, like I said, is there are a number of different departments communicating with their constituents. And a lot of the time we see that they often operate independently. So admissions might be sending a message at this time, and advancement is sending one at another time, and then throw financial aid and student success in there. And everyone's just sending messages at different times, and there's different tones of those messaging. Different information is shared to students and other constituents, and oftentimes it can lead to either over or under communicating with your students or constituents. And a lot of times that can leave the student feeling disconnected. So when we think of a student, they think one institution when they think of it. They don't necessarily think of the different departments. And so it can lead to confusion, fatigue, and ultimately missed opportunities for each institution. Courtney, you're muted.
I knew that was going to happen at least once. You're all welcome. So today, students are really expecting fast, clear, consistent communication They're not really thinking about what office they're talking to. They just want answers. And when communication is not aligned, you're going to see slower responses, repeated questions, which we've all seen. And sometimes students are just disengaging altogether. By the time we get back to them, it's almost like then we're waiting on them to get back to us. Internally, your team is probably going to spend more time coordinating than actually helping students and getting to your goals. Christina, tell us a little more about before using Mongoose. How did departments communicate with students?
Yeah, so before we were extremely siloed. So when I came into my position with the recruitment and marketing team, what I saw was just the things that Mary had mentioned earlier, is that each department was communicating in their own way. Most of that communication relied on very traditional methods. We were mailing most of the information out in terms of financial aid, and we were sending emails to the students, and sometimes we were sending emails to their student accounts as new students, and yet they hadn't gained even access to that. So we weren't even thinking about, do they have access to the channel that we're using? And it was very fragmented and kind of all over the board. And so what we were looking to do was really not just find a texting solution, but found how we can best use whatever it is that the students are at their time to really unify those communications. And so we brought everything together and really took a look at what was doing and how we were relating those communications, and even took a look at everything from phone calls to anything that we were using to do that, and found where there were gaps too, right? And we could see kind of the overlap of what was happening.
Yeah, and that's a common starting point, and it's really highlighting something more important, I think, and that is like more channels doesn't always mean better communication. And so the shift to texting isn't just about adding in a tool, it's about rethinking how teams work together, which brings us to the next idea. We're moving from access to true alignment across teams.
Yeah, so instead of necessarily just giving everyone access to send messages, sometimes we see it's like, oh, let's give everyone access to do this. It's making sure that everyone is working together in a coordinated way. So, like we said, it's not working in silos like we were talking about at the beginning. Historically, the approach has always been give people more access to communication tools. And while, yes, it's great to have more tools and more technology, it often can create more noise and not more clarity. So that's where the shift to move to the alignment, where each team has clear roles and responsibilities, is where it can be super beneficial, not only to your internal teams, but also to your students and constituents. So, one idea that we have heard from other partners of ours and things that we're seeing across the industry is marketing can own the messaging, the tone, really own the brand of the institution, and making sure that teams have what they need to ensure consistent branding across communication. IT ensures the data and accuracy, making sure you have the right context, the right fields, all of that stuff in Mongoose so that you can communicate with your constituents and students. And then the departments ultimately own that communication and own engaging with their students. Now, we know that's not always the case on all campuses. So, making sure if this aligns with your institution, that's great. But if not, making sure people have clear roles and responsibilities is where it comes in and is extremely helpful. So whether it's having a department lead from each department who manages the communication and makes sure everyone's on the same page, this is just one idea that we've heard from others. And as teams begin texting more and more, consistency becomes critical. Tone, ownership, responsibility, all of that stuff is where it all needs to be aligned. And that's where a campus-wide texting policy can play a huge role to make sure everyone has a clear understanding of who's responsible for what. And I'll talk through that a little bit down the line, but I have a quick question for you, Christina. How do you and your team help ensure clarity around who owns communication across departments?
Yes, I think this is really important, and you hit on a lot of the key ideas for us that I had to kind of really think through when we first started this. So you are absolutely right in saying that IT doesn't own the communication. But when I went to purchase it in recruitment at that time, I said, well, I'm not going to own this either. So who's going to do this, right? And so what we do is that we found those champions, as we call them, in each of the areas. And I think it's key to think about that champion doesn't always have to be the lead of that department. So I went for who is at the guts and knows the most within that department, kind of making things work. And oftentimes it might not be who you suspect, but that's the first person then that I made the champion alongside the group. And so I looked at the overall organizational chart of the college and then found each team that I knew we were going to bring on board and then structured around that. So, yep, the primary oversight lies outside of IT. But as you mentioned, we do have a marketing coordinator and an internal communications coordinator, and they overall see the branding and that the message is something that we'd want to do, right? Because it is one of those things that you can get off brand with and very quickly. And you want to make sure that you do have some control around that too. So we gave some guidance, set those templates out, and then each one was able to kind of own their area and approach what they needed for their purpose.
Awesome. And I think that's a great point, is it's not always just giving everyone access, but making sure everyone has that shared understanding of what is the goal of texting with students, what is the goal of communicating with them, and making sure everyone's all on the same page with that. So I think that's a great way to look at it, and really have that ownership sometimes lie within the departments, and that's totally fine. But making sure you have that core group of those individuals who are all on the same page. So looking ahead a little bit of how this can be rolled out at your institution. So instead of thinking of a texting policy as this new idea on campus that you want to implement, it can look a little bit like this. So it's a consistent voice across departments. There's clear ownership of who is having those conversations with the students. And most importantly, it allows multiple teams to text and communicate with students without creating confusion for the students. So we have to think of it from the student's perspective. If they receive a message from admissions, for example, it's a new student, they receive a message from admissions Monday morning, and then 2 hours later, they receive a message from financial aid, they can be a little confused of who should I be responding back to, or who should I go to with this question. So really making sure everyone's on the same page of who's communicating with students when. And that's where a texting policy can be super helpful, especially for internal. I'm talking texting policy for your internal staff and employees, not for the student. So a set of guidelines to help you all make sure everyone's on the same page internally, and that your communication all aligns across campus. In our follow-up email that will likely be sent tomorrow, we'll include a link to an example texting policy that you are welcome to take a look at, steal ideas from if you want to implement that on your campus and with your teams. But it's a great starting point of making sure everyone is all on the same page with the communication that is going to students. So question for you, Christina, how do you ensure students aren't being over communicated with, since you have so many different teams and departments leveraging Mongoose?
So I think you bring up a good point about the texting policy. And I think our approach to that kind of helped everyone buy in from it, because before I rolled out the texting policy with them, I brought all of those groups together and we simply just asked, what is it that you're communicating? When is it that you're communicating it? And why is it that you're communicating? So we got to all those answers that you need, right? And then once we found that, it was cool because we laid it out within a chart and we could see that some of that overlap that you mentioned. And so it was really neat because then the departments kind of saw for themselves, well, that's not going to work in terms of, what a new student experience is, or we leave this big gap with here, or we weren't communicating at all in these cases. So it really brought to light, and we created this calendar together. And from that calendar, we put all of the touch points, and then we also talked through which channel of communication was important and which one we thought should be used. That way we could discuss between ourselves and kind of figure out, is it a text message that's appropriate, or is it more appropriate in this, or how could we incorporate maybe two together and combine communication? So we love the fact that we worked together on that calendar and made a very approached idea to make sure that everybody was on there. I think our purposes were clear. And then it was easy when we got to the texting policy then, because it already just made sense to them. And it wasn't something that we were saying, no, you can't do. Because as you talked about that access before, because we weren't giving everyone access, they were like, well, why can't I do it? How come I'm not able to do it? Right. But now I'd engaged with those folks and they knew and could kind of help the other friends see that, it was okay that they didn't have access. Here's why we're making those very strategic decisions along the way.
I love that. That's great. And I think it's a great idea to sit down and create that calendar and make sure, okay, are there spots where we are over communicating with students about a specific topic? Or are there areas where we thought this department was handling this, but really it should be my department that is taking that on? So ultimately, making sure that students have a clear understanding and are receiving the messages that they need to receive. And I think a lot of times when partners of ours sit down and actually look at what areas are communicating with students when and through what channels, they're surprised at how much is actually going on. And so to make sure everyone is on the same page and can coordinate together, I think that first step is always the hardest point because it is a little bit of a lift. But once you do it that first time, then it helps make sure all of the departments are aligned moving forward. And so with that, Courtney and I were chatting before we were going through some ideas for this webinar, and she shared a great example of a way that one of her customers make sure those students feel that alignment across all of the departments.
Yes, I love talking about this. So, it's my favorite kind of real life example that I had mentioned earlier on like ways that texts land really well with students. And it came from a recent conversation I had with one of my customers. So they also have a bunch of teams across campus, and the admissions team inevitably is going to actively text applicants during the whole enrollment process. And oftentimes when that's done, the admissions team is done communicating. But what they added in was a super powerful step, which is a very simple handoff once a student is enrolled. Admissions would send a text. It was something like, congrats again, our student services team will be reaching out to you shortly to introduce themselves and will be able to support you as you get started. Then within a few hours, the student services team would follow up with a welcome message because they had full context from their conversation with admissions. The scheduled send feature in Mongoose makes that very, very easy. And so if you know admissions will send that text at 10 a.m., you can schedule that message from student services to go out a couple hours later. And fast forward to graduation, they did the same thing from student services to their career services team. And that was like, hey, Courtney, as you get closer to graduation, I want to connect you with our career services team to support your next steps. Again, career services was aligned on timing. So we're not starting from scratch. We're just continuing that relationship. And what's really powerful to me here is that student is never going to feel like they're being passed around or over inundated with messages because the communication is so clear. It's just going to feel like that one continuous conversation from enrollment all the way through graduation and beyond. And just to be clear, I want to add, this is not necessary for every team, every department all the time. What I think is most powerful is when it's a true handoff, when you know one team is kind of done communicating with the student, is a great time to pull in the next department and use those scheduled send messages to introduce themselves. So that leads me to my
I was just going to add, I think those transition points in the student life cycle is where it's super helpful to have those handoffs.
Absolutely. Yeah. Christina, curious from your standpoint, what changes you've seen since becoming more aligned across teams, since having those internal conversations?
We certainly have more targeted, branded, and timely communications across all departments because each of us know what the next department is doing and not just in texting, right? Remember, because this is a piece of it, but it did everything with our communications. And so that's extremely important. We've seen very low opt out rates and we tout those because we are doing a lot of text. But I think that if you balance that with that targeted and timely, and then the engagement piece, as you mentioned, Courtney, with those handoffs and different ideas, I think that you can really help students be and see that unified, and it is one voice, and it feels very, joined together and collective.
Yeah, absolutely. And we love low opt-out rates here. And I feel like overall what you're describing, it's not just better messaging, it's a better experience for the student. Like they are feeling like they are in it with you all and they're never confused about who is reaching out to them. And when we get that coordinated, timely communication, students truly feel the difference. And so that's really exactly what we want to leave you all with today. So we're going to wrap up with a few key takeaways. And I want to start here though, Christina, for institutions just getting started with this whole concept of getting aligned. Is there any advice that you would give them?
I certainly would get together your core group of who you believe will be those champions and find those folks to do this and start with that group. And then it is kind of a heavy lift, as mentioned, to do the whole mapping of the communications out if you have not done that recently, but it's also the most valuable tool. And you can certainly take and do everything from letters, like we talked about, to phone calls. And once you have that done, then I kind of call it smooth sailing from there because then you can start to really use all the tools most effective and pull everyone together. And you can find the best examples that have been used in each area and you'll really unify that message. So find your champions, put the group together, map your communications out, and it will just start to play. And it gets to be kind of fun. I love it when we had seen or learned something or new difference. And then I review it often. We've had it for a while now. And I said, I think it's a good time because just yesterday I engaged in a conversation and we hadn't reviewed our communications. And there was a piece that was missing because the other one hadn't been updated. So it's nice because this group, if you stay together with it, can really help with that piece.
That is good advice. Thank you for that takeaway. It really, I feel like, reinforces something we've just talked about through this whole session, which is success with texting. It doesn't just start with the technology, it's going to start with clarity and coordination across teams internally. Taking the time to map out communication, assign ownership, shared expectations, moving toward an aligned approach will happen. It can happen rather quickly once you invest some time up front. Is there anything you'd recommend institutions focus on first as they start to streamline communication outside of getting your champions together?
What it is that students need to know and the amount of that information they need to know at the right time. This is like this balance in higher education. We love to give everybody everything right up front, just like we do with access, right? And especially a new student, we kind of just throw everything at them. And it's the wrong approach for the unification and wrong because the students will then tune us out. So I would say find what pieces of the message that are most important and make sure that that's carried through. It's gonna take multiple messages, right? You can't just have one communication about when classes begin. It's gonna have to be weaved in within the messages. So find your key things. Like financial aid for us is huge. And so we made sure that some piece of the financial was weaved in with each one of those like steps or ideas that we were tracing out. So find those key points.
I love that. It's bringing us right back to that whole idea that we're not just talking about adding more, we're just being more intentional and creating that clear communication for our students. And so as we wrap up, let's just bring all this together with a few key takeaways. First, the goal isn't to give everyone more access to tools, it's to create alignment across teams That's what allows communication to scale effectively. Second, students don't see your departments. They just want one seamless experience. And when communication is disconnected, they're going to feel it pretty immediately. Third, as more teams begin texting, having that shared texting policy becomes critical. That's what ensures consistency in tone, timing, and ownership. And that texting policy we will share out when we send out this recording as well, so you'll all be able to see that. And finally, when you combine alignment, visibility, and shared standards, you can create truly seamless handoffs so students experience one continuous journey from admissions all the way through graduation and beyond. And that's where the real impact happens. So that brings us to the end. We've got a little bit of time left here. If anybody has any questions for us or Christina, please feel free to throw them into chat. We will field those.
Can I add one thing that I think is important?
Yeah,
Yes,
please.
I think it's important to not forget that it doesn't always have to be about business things either. That if you really want to form that relationship and keep that engagement piece, then add some fun into it as well, so that they can build that trust with you and continue to interact with you. I love that things that we did in housing, we do birthday text messages to all the residents, and it's, one of those things to balance, like, we're gonna do your room inspection today, but then they stay engaged with us because they know too that, oh, look, I got this cool birthday text message for them, or how did they do that, right? They don't know all the magic behind the programming and that kind of thing. And so it makes it feel like it's one of those things. And I love that, during graduation, we started during COVID, that we do all of the invitation out about how to view our graduation ceremony. And that is the most forwarded message ever, right? Because then they can share it and do it. We could eliminate a lot of the other posts, but that text message was really the most important. So have some fun with them too. I know our student accommodations department works, and we time out texts that say, hey, do you need a break? Come over and grab a cookie from me in my office. I just think that those things are really important because it'll lead to other engagement with that student to be successful. So don't just do all business. It's kind of my key.
And it adds the human element to it. So they see you as a person and not just someone that they have to go to for business matters.
And remember, in the world of AI today, they don't know that it's not a real person until you've created more that they know it's real. And I love that they can still see that real side, and it is a person that can help you in this case. So AI agents are great, but the human is wonderful to connect and create that relationship.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, I know there are a few questions in the chat, so please feel free to keep throwing them in. There is one from Amanda. She asked Christina, could you share your team setup within Mongoose?
Mm-hmm.
And do you have multiple, and do they exist across the student life cycle, or is admission separate?
So our institution is organized. I think that might help. We have a recruitment team, which is not part of the admissions team. So we do all the onboarding with the student up until that registration. And once their registration, then they become part of our admissions team. So that's why I have two separate teams with very different goals in there. And then the other student services are split up. So student activities is its own team within it. And then I also have a team for academics that is split up. So we kind of structured it based on how we are organizational wise. So that's kind of who can oversee in terms of what they're doing. So I don't have everyone split out. There is one group, our tutoring, our library services are all underneath one group together because of where they're located and how they interact with the students. So that's kind of how I thought about how to make those groups or teams.
Awesome. I think that's super helpful. She also asked how are rolling dynamic triggered messages represented in your calendar? Are those in a separate document?
We put everything within a SharePoint drive that we have access to, and then we expanded that access to not just people that have the access in Mongoose, because they're curious too, and so they can see each message. So we've incorporated within one SharePoint drive that we can share with everyone, and one calendar.
Awesome. I think that's a great point, is the visibility into that too, so that everyone on campus knows what kind of messaging and what messaging is going out to students.
We have the Ellucian portal. So on our portal page, we have a card, and anyone that we've given access to our SharePoint site can go to that communications card and then see the things that have been sent out. Because sometimes the operator answering the phone needs to know what was just sent for the letter, because they call in and they say, we got this letter I need to talk to, but they didn't read quite all of it, or I don't have the letter in front of them. So that's kind of why we've done that.
Awesome. That's great.
We have one question in the Q&A. So this is for Christina. Looking back, what is one thing you wished you would have done sooner when it came to aligning communications across your campus?
Talked more about branding and the language in it. I assumed these folks had been sending emails and sending communications, and I kind of trusted that their financial aid folks would do financial aid and be good with it, right? But in doing that, I think what was the hard part is that they use sometimes very technical terms and get, like I said, into the weeds before the student would need that. And so I wish I'd have looked at the communications sooner and kind of went through that language to make it more streamlined and student friendly.
That's a great tip, and I think something that often gets forgotten when different departments and in everything, that students don't always know all of the acronyms or things that we use in higher ed, because there are a lot of them. So making sure that it's clear for all of the students is a great point.
Mhm.
Any other questions that you saw, Janine?
Not in the Q&A. I see there is a question about the contact card.
Yeah. So Cassidy asked, what Ellucian system is that contact card connected to? And where is it viewed by your operator? I would love to get something like that set up.
Yeah, and it's so when we log into our MyWit portal, I have a Lucene experience, and I've created a custom card, and then we have that information within our SharePoint. So there's kind of some connections that we've done in there, but I can certainly connect offline too and show how that card's set up and what we've done with it.
Awesome. That's great. Any other questions or things that anyone wants to make sure we answer today before we wrap up? Awesome. Well, the last thing I will leave you all with is, if you haven't heard, on April 21st, which is next Tuesday, we are super excited to officially be launching AI agents with Mongoose. So we are having a webinar again next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. If you aren't registered yet, Deneen will throw the link in the chat. I would highly recommend registering. As Christina mentioned before, AI is great and a layer to help lighten the workload of your teams. And ultimately, this is not going to replace your teams by any means, but instead lighten the workload and make sure that your team is there to help support your students for those things that need that human element to it. So we will be doing a deep dive into what AI agents are going to look like in Mongoose and how they can help support your teams right within the Mongoose platform that you are all familiar with today. So we hope you all can join us for that webinar next week as well. It'll be a fun one. Dave, our CEO, will be leading it for us. But I think that is all for today. Anything else that I'm missing, Janine or Courtney?
You got it.
That's it. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate having you here. Mary, Courtney, Christina, thank you all for sharing today. Have a great afternoon, everyone.